Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So we have my dad's 97 here again and doing some general maintenance to it. So we had the thermostat neck done in this, and then we also said, hey, we're going to rotate the tires because the tires need rotated. Well, I pulled the tires off and I'm going to show you what I found here. So you can see some light checking in the rotor over here. So he had been complaining about some shaking while on the brakes. So I was like, okay, well, we'll check it out and see. So, there's some heat checking in the rotors, and they're probably going to need replaced. But we came over here to the other side, and yeah, definitely going to need replaced. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be going ahead and putting new brake pads and brake rotors on this truck. So this is the Dana 50. However, this process does convert over to the Dana 60 as well. It's the same process. And I'm going to show you how to pull all this stuff apart and change a set of rotors on one of these trucks. It can be a little tedious. It's not as easy as, say, the newer trucks where you literally just take off your caliper and your caliper bracket and pull the rotor off. You have to physically take out the hub on the inside and pull the bearings, and you have to physically take everything apart, pound the studs out and everything. So I'm going to show you the process of doing that today with this truck. So let's get started. We're going to get started on the back here. We're going to be taking this caliper off and this caliper bracket. I like to take a C-clamp and compress this as far as I can get it to compress, especially since we're going to be putting on new pads. Doing that also helps you get the caliper off a little bit easier. It also tests the caliper, because if you start to compress this and it doesn't want to compress, or it compresses very oddly, you might be willing to check the pistons that are in the caliper here. Make sure you don't have a seized up piston or a seized up slide. Now this truck has the bolt-in slides, which is great, not the hammer-in slides, which are horrible. So these actually are the better design, but they have their problems as well. So we're going to go ahead and take this caliper off. I'm just going to set it up there on the leaf spring. Now we have our pads here. Pull the pads off. We'll pull our metal retainers out of here if they'll come out. No, they don't want to come out, which is fine. We'll take them off later. So now we have to take out the caliper bracket. The bolts for the caliper itself on this truck were 13 millimeter. The bolts here are 21 millimeter. And the easiest way to do this is to turn the wheel and get in here with an impact, because these are generally pretty tight. They should have blue Loctite on them as well. And looks like these ones are dry. So once you take those two bolts out, you can remove this. So we have our bolts here. You can see there may have been some Loctite on there at one point, but we'll clean these off and put Loctite on them before we put it back on. Blue is what you want to use. And now we have the whole assembly here. We don't have any brakes. We're going to check our bearings. Sounds like the lockout makes a little bit of noise, but not too bad. So don't think we have any bearing issues here. Might be a tiny bit of play in these bearings, but it could also be in this cap. Yeah, the cap moves a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and pull this cap off and get this whole assembly off. If you have the worn caps, it'll be a 9/64 Allen key to hold all these on. Should be very similarly sized if you have the auto caps or any other cap, but these ones are the worn ones. So we're going to go ahead and get these Allen keys out of the front here. So once you get all your Allen keys loosened up there, your Allen bolts, go ahead and pull your cap off. Now this is where the fun is going to begin here. So sometimes you have a snap ring on the end of the stub shaft here, which this one does have. I'm not too concerned about that just yet. The first one that we got to get is the one inside here. So there is a locking ring that goes on between the hub and the actual steel hub. So this is your lockout hub and then the actual hub that holds the whole unit. You can see the very, very edge of it right here, that little shiny spot. So there's an exterior clip. So we're going to have to dig that out of there to get the hub lockout out. Now there's two designs for this. So this one is like the spring style design, and you have to, so if it's on here like this, you have to take this tail here and turn it like this to get it to come out of that groove and round the lockout. So I have a broken screwdriver that's real small that I use for that. And I get underneath it and I just kind of like start twisting it to get it out. There is one other style that is just a solid ring, and it'll have a gap between the tail and the tail that would be over here. You just push it down and pry it out, and it would come right out. So these are a little bit harder to get out, but they are also a little bit more secure. So if you have done one of these before, they're a little bit easier. So that holds the lockout inside here. And then what you need to do now is, since we do have a clip on the stub shaft here, just push your lockout in a little bit. You might have to turn it to get it to sit in there a little bit farther, and then you can pull this clip out. Now pull two of your bolts out of your lockout here and just thread them into the hub. And this should come out just like that. So at this point now we have the 4-prong nuts that are on the inside here. You can see the nut on there. So there is a special socket for that, obviously. So let's see if we can get a better angle for you so you can see inside there. So you can see that there's tabs on the exterior nut there, and then you can see a washer behind it with 4 little tabs that stick out behind. So there'll be another nut behind that washer. So the idea is we have to take this washer out, the nut off, the washer off, and then the nut off. And then the outside wheel bearing will come out, and then we should be able to pull the whole unit off. So we also have the correct socket for this. This is, let's see if there's a brand on it. Nope. But this is a Dana 60 lockout hub socket, and it will go on here and you'll fiddle with it for a little bit and then you'll feel it lock in. So that's how you have to get those nuts off of there. Now, if you have a different design, now this is for the worn in factory style lockouts. You could also have this style of a hub, which is, I think this was a 2 9/16. So I've seen this style before. And then I've also seen a 3-prong style, which I think is on the automatic hubs. Wow. That one was pretty tight. So after you break it loose here, you can go ahead and spin this out. So there's our nut inside the socket here. Now we have a washer inside. You can see with the little holes in it. And it does have an ear on the top of it here. So that ear would go inside the spindle there. I'll show you that ear here in a little bit. But these holes are important, and I'll show you why here in a little bit. So now you have another 4-prong nut in there. Now you see down here, right there is a little, like a nipple or tit sticking out of that nut. Keep that in mind because that will screw you up when you put the socket on too. So the socket won't want to sit on here nicely sometimes. You can see it wiggles a little bit. But yeah, this one should not be nearly as tight as the other one was. You can see how the socket wiggles as I take this out. So we have this nut out of here. And here is that little pin on the nut here. So you can see that little pin. So this is the nut that goes in first. The pin needs to be facing you. Do not put this on first or last. Do not put this on the wrong way. This is very important for the locking mechanism to lock the hub onto the truck. At this point now, the only thing we're holding this rotor on is the fact that the wheel bearing is still in there and kind of tight with grease. So we should be able to just pull this off of here. Don't lose your bearing out the front. And I was talking about that little ear on the washer with the holes in it. It will actually slide into this groove right here on the spindle. So it only goes one way. So that is very important when you're reinstalling all this, that this all goes back in the correct way. So we've got our rotor here and it's off the spindle up here. So we have the bearing now that needs to come out. And bearing doesn't look bad. However, I don't know what grease they used in it the last time. It's pretty thick, so we may have to put some new grease on here. It's never a bad thing to repack bearings. So now I'll show you the back of this. You can see that we have a seal here, and it looks to me like the seal has been leaking a little bit here, and we're probably going to end up replacing that seal as well. You need to replace this seal if you pull that bearing out, because the bearing is technically held in by the seal. So if you want to repack this bearing, you have to buy a new seal as well. Now, to get the rotor off of the actual hub, we have to knock out all of those studs. And just like that, you have a hub without a rotor. So you can see all of the grime that's on here. So this seal has not been doing a very, very good job of sealing, which is not a good thing either. So here's all of your studs. You can see the knurling on them there. So this rotor is going to go in the scrap pile. We're going to set all these studs off to the side for now. We're going to work on getting this seal replaced at this point. So we need to change the seal out so that it can actually do some sealing here instead of leaking, because if grease is getting out, dirt is getting in, and that's not good. So you can actually see on this surface back here that this seal has actually put a little bit of a groove in the surface there. So definitely going to be putting a new seal in here, because this seal is obviously worn out. So we're going to have to change that out too. Now we've moved over to the vise. I'm going to pop this seal out of here. There's a couple different ways to get these seals out, but we're going to try a couple different methods here. We're going to try this heel bar, see if it'll pull that out of there easy. And then make sure you drop your bearing. So we're going to be reusing obviously the hub here, but we're going to go ahead and clean all the grease out of here, and that's going to be a little time consuming because we've got to clean everything out of the inside, everything on the outside, and then also clean up our bearings. So we're going to go ahead, get this cleaned up. We've gotten everything cleaned up now, and we've got the bearings out. We have this hub cleaned up. We cleaned all the grease off of the spindle here, and I don't know how well you can see this, so I might have to bring the camera in. We have some dark spots where these bearings were riding. And in all reality, it looks like somebody has done a little bit of work to this spindle at some point. Not a whole lot there. However, whenever I got these bearings out and got them all cleaned up, the front one wasn't too bad. There's a little bit of a heat signature on it. However, the rear one, it has gotten hot here. So see how the rollers themselves are discolored, and you see the groove that's in every single roller there. That is all signs of heat. This is going to be a little bit more difficult to do here. You can see the race in here, right here. You see that dark band in there? That should not have a dark band on it. So this race right here has also gotten hot and discolored. There's also some marks in it from heat checking. So we're going to end up putting new races and bearings in this truck. We're going to end up doing both sides. This side too. It's hard to see so far back in there, but the race way back here at the end of my thumb, you can see it has a dark band on it. it also has gotten a little bit warm at some point. And that heat has also transferred onto the spindle here. And I'm going to bring the camera over here and show this to you so you can actually see how dark it is, because it's a lot easier to see on the bottom half, obviously, because that's the weight carrying side. So we're definitely going to be doing new bearings in here, new races in the hub here, and a new seal in the back. So we had spun this and the bearings sounded okay and there was no play in them. However, the fact that I see all this signs of heat and issues with the heat, we don't want to be running into a problem where we're going to get a bearing failure. So that bearing having gotten hot has changed its, I guess you'd call it, metallurgy. So it doesn't have the same hardness now that it's gotten hot. And we don't want to have a sporadic bearing failure at some point. So we're this far into this, so we're going to end up putting new bearings on here as well. So we're going to go ahead and get the new bearings and get the races here and get everything packed and installed. And I'll show you a couple tricks for changing the races out inside a hub. The only bad thing is you need a welder. So we're going to go ahead and get these welded up, get these things out of here, and show you how to put new ones in. And I don't have any race drivers, so I'll show you some backyard tricks for that. And we're going to go ahead and get the new bearings packed, get the new races installed, and get everything lubricated correctly and get this thing back together. So you can see the heat marks on the hub right here, on the spindle here, and on the spindle back here. You can see how it's all been heat checked, and you could actually see where there's some clean streaks in here. That's where the spindle was actually starting to fail. So luckily this isn't bad. It's close, it's good enough to save. So that's why we're going to be cleaning everything. So we got everything cleaned up, and now we're going to get these races out. So what we're going to do is we're going to end up putting a bead of weld around the whole inside of this race here. And what that's going to do is it's going to expand it out and then shrink it back down. So we're going to do this side, and then we're going to flip it over and do the other side as well down in the hub. Now, before you do that, you want to make sure that you've cleaned the inside of this hub really well, and you want to make sure that there's no contaminants such as oil or grease, something flammable, because you don't want to start a fire in this little cavity. That's not good. So this is nice and clean and dry, so we're going to go ahead and put some weld in here. So we've got to weld the whole way around there. We're going to let that cool off. And while that cools off, we're going to go ahead and flip it over. And we'll do the inside here.
So we'll show you what we got going on in here. You can kind of see that there's a bead of weld on the inside of the race. And then you can see this one clear as day back here. It's not so far down in. So now you can see that some of the oil has crept out of the front surface there. You can see it's glossy. So we're going to try and tap these out. And you can see that one's already starting to come out. So watch this. So that one just fell out of there like that. So that one's done. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult because it's so big. So we just have to nick it with a punch to get it down in there. So we have our races out, both sides here, and we'll clean that all up and we'll get the new races put in. So you can see that we put a bead of weld the whole way around the inside of the race. And same for this one. So that's the easiest way to get races out. And I'll show you how to put the new ones in. And ironically, it's going to involve this. We've got our races here. So this one we had in the freezer for a little while. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you that it doesn't quite drop in nice. So we're going to add a little bit of freezing to it. So what you do is you grab a can of compressed air. And what you're going to do is basically just hold it upside down and spray this. And that one's apparently empty. So upside down, you can see it's cold coming out. So make sure you wear gloves. And then you can kind of tap it in to get it started. And then what I like to do is I'll take the old race and use it as a guide. And then what you can do is pull this out of here, look from the other side in, and make sure that you are fully seated on the lip here. So we got one side here done. And you can tell it's seated because you'll hear the sound change when you hit it. So now we're going to go ahead, grab the other one here that's also in the freezer, bring it back here, give it a little bit of a freeze, and stick it down in there. So we got our last race here. We're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to freeze this. This is the worst one to do. So we gave it a little extra freezing. So we have our races set. Same thing here, look through the back side, make sure that you're all seated around the back side of the race. You can see that it's installed there. So we're going to go ahead and pack the bearings for in here, and I'll show you how to pack bearings to get these done correctly. So if you're working on a Dana 50 front axle for a OBS truck, now these are specific to 96, 97. I'm not sure how far back they go. However, your inner bearing is going to be a 387A. Its mating race is going to be a 382A. Your outer bearing is going to be an LM104949, and its mating race is going to be an LM104911. Now your wheel seal that goes in the back here is going to be a 415960, and that's a national number. So that's what we're going to be using for a seal in the back here. What we're going to do now is we're going to pack these bearings. Now this is very, very important to do because these bearings need to be properly lubricated before installing. So we have our new bearing here, Timken 387A. So we're going to be using these bearings because our old bearings were heat checked, so we're just replacing everything along with the races inside. And you want to use something like this Valvoline moly fortified grade grease. Now the key here is this meets the Ford specifications, and this is what you want to be using. You want to use a lithium complex multi-purpose extreme pressure grease. So this is basically what you want to use when you're doing wheel bearings on one of these trucks. This is what it calls for. This is what you want to use. It's very gooey looking. It's kind of soft, but this is what you want to use. And you're going to want to pack the bearing fully. So basically you want to get some grease and you're going to put it in your hand and just pack through the bearing. Just get a glob of it like this and just start going to town. So this is how you know that you have enough. This is how you know you have enough. You can see it coming out the top of the bearing here because we're packing it in from the back. And we're going to do this all the way around the bearing. So you can see we're getting all the way around the bearing. The grease is coming out the top. You saw me packing the grease into this bearing here, and we had a technical difficulty with the video there, so you didn't get to see me finish packing the grease into this bearing here. However, we went ahead and did all the other bearings, and we applied some lubrication inside here as well, inside of the actual housing here, you can see that it's on the seal area there. And we applied some down in the well also of the housing here. So the next thing we did was we put the bearing in, give it a couple spins, make sure it's seated nice and easy, and then we're going to go ahead and install our new seal here. So this is our new seal, and you want to make sure that you install this correctly. So the spring side would go in. So this would be the side with a spring on it, and it goes in like this. And all this has to do is tap down flat. Which is sometimes easier said than done. So you can see that it had bumped in there a little bit, so we can actually pop that out with a heel bar. So while that doesn't always happen, it does happen occasionally. And if I had the proper driver, that would have happened. So that gives you a quick, simple alternative for fixing that. So we don't have any issues here. We made sure that heel bar was way in there so you don't damage this rubber seal. We'll repeat this on the other hub, but we're going to go ahead and install this guy and show you how to install this back onto the truck. We have our hub here with our newly installed bearing and seal. We now need to put our new rotor on. So the rotor slides on like that. And to secure it in, you're going to put all your studs back in. Now the one thing I do like to do is I like to set a block of wood underneath the hub here. So that way you're not destroying the face because we'll be mounted on steel here. So we've got a piece of wood underneath here. And we're basically going to drive the studs in from the back with a punch. So this can take some time. So we're going to get this all done here and then move on to getting the hub put back on. So we got a little bit longer, a little bit thicker punch here used to set the studs in. So you can pick this up and listen to if you hear any click noises or see if it's actually moving on here because you don't want them to move. But when you put this on with the wheel and everything, make sure that you recheck your torque after you drive it a little bit, because as you put the wheel on, it's going to suck these studs in more, which could also cause your wheel to be loose. So that's why you want to make sure that they're set as far as you can. And you never want to use the studs themselves with nuts to draw it in, because it takes a lot of force to get these set in the whole way. So you don't want to use the threaded nuts on the studs themselves because you actually strip them out. So we're going to wipe this backside with the brake clean, get it clean, and we're going to put it on the spindle here. Now the idea here is do not touch the surface now. I had this bearing sitting on here, so we're just gonna pull this guy off and set it down. And we're gonna slide the whole unit on here. Sometimes you get it the first try, sometimes you don't. So once you get that on there, you can slide your other bearing on in the front. Get it started. Next thing you're going to do is take one of the nuts, the one with the tab on it, tab facing out, you're going to thread it on there. So the easiest way to put this on is to tab down into the tool socket here and just get it started by hand. So we have our torque wrench here. We have it set at 50 foot-pounds. Now you want to tighten this as you spin the wheel. Okay, so it clicked there. Let me check it again here. I'm going to spin it a couple times. And the reason I'm going to spin it a couple times is because we're still working the grease into these new bearings. All right, so now we're going to loosen this up. So we've loosened that up. And now we're going to re-torque this to 40 foot-pounds. While also spinning. So now that we've torqued this inner nut to 40, it does spin nice. It's got a little bit of resistance, obviously, because we have new grease in here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our washer here, and I'm going to point out that the holes in here, so you can see that you have your main tab here, which goes on top. You have this hole here, and then you have this hole here. Now, depending on where that ear is all the way around this, you can flip this over to get a little bit different of a position of the hole. You just have to make sure that this is on the top of the spindle because it only fits one way. So this takes a little bit of trial and error. You may have to flip it around a couple times. But the one thing that we are going to do first is you got to back that 40 off 90 degrees. We'll give it a spin. You can see it spins a lot nicer there. It's not so stiff. So that's what we want. Now we're going to go ahead and put our washer in. So you basically locate your pin on the inside here. And I grabbed a pair of snap ring pliers here because this makes this a little bit easier. So that doesn't fit that way. So pull it out and we'll flip it over. And that lined perfectly up with the hole, which is amazing. So see if I can get you to see in here so you can see what we did. You can see the pin sticking through the hole here in the top right there. And that's what you want to see. Now you're going to put your outside nut back on. So the outside nut does not have a pin on it. So we just put it in the socket here. Now this is a jam nut, so this doesn't need to be spun as you install it. And this gets to be 160 foot-pounds. Make sure your wheel steel freely spins. We have no play here. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our hub. Following the same procedure, I'm going to go ahead and put this guy together. I'll turn this for you so you can see what we're doing here. So we installed it like that. We'll take these two bolts out. Place those back in our cap. We now need to install this snap ring here. This snap ring will go on the inside of the shaft here. It clicks into place. And then we can install the retaining ring for the hub itself. And it just slides in the same way that you took it out. My only suggestion for you is you have these slots around the hub. Try to get your tails to line up with that. It makes your life easier for removing. Now you can spin these, but sometimes they don't like to spin. And it's clicked in. It's not real difficult to get it in there, but sometimes it can fight you. Next order of business now is going to be, we're going to put this cap back on. Now this cap will only go on here one way because it has alignment ears. Well, I guess I should say it will go on one of three ways. Now that we've got them all started and snug, we tighten them up. Don't have to go crazy with those because they do go into aluminum there. They just need to be snug. There is an O-ring on the back of this hub. Once again, I'm going to give this another spin. Everything seems to be nice and tight, no loose, no play. So now we're going to go ahead and wipe the face of the caliper or the rotor off here because we got it all dirty earlier. Once we do that, we can go ahead and start putting our caliper bracket and caliper back on. So we're going to put our caliper bracket on first. We have pulled the old clips off and installed the new clips. If you look there, you can see that the fat side of the clip is towards the outside of the truck and the skinny side is on the inside. And we're going to go ahead and put this on here. We have cleaned our bolts, and I'm just going to thread one in for this moment. That way it gets held. We're going to use some 243 and put a little bit of Loctite on these bolts. Don't need a whole lot. Once you get your caliper mount on, spin your rotor around, make sure you have no interferences with your clips. Then take your brake pads and install them on your bracket here. Now we've already pushed the caliper in, hopefully it was enough. Which is beautiful, so we did that first when we took them off. So you slide the top in, then put the bottom down in, and reinstall your bolts. Now also we did check the slides to make sure that they were moving freely, so that is a very important thing that you need to do. And you can lubricate these, but I recommend using a disc brake lubricant. Do not use anti-seize for these slides. The OBS trucks aren't as notorious for slide problems as the newer trucks are. And we have a caliper here, and it is complete. So we have our new bearings in here, we have a new rotor, we have new brake pads, and we've got everything installed for you. So hopefully that'll help you guys out whenever you're working on your truck. You know, it kind of gives you the idea of getting the wheel bearings all done here, as well as getting a new rotor put on one of these older trucks, and then also the new pads. So like I said, this is a slide caliper, so this is a newer style caliper. So this is a little bit easier than the slide pin calipers, which are a little bit more of a pain in the butt to work with. So hopefully this helps you guys out in getting your truck all set up here, and hopefully that can help you save a little bit of money in the shop. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.